Anna Harlow had traded the last bit of her pride for a roof over her head, but she hadn't expected what Jacob Thornton would offer her in return. In the bleak winter of December 1881, Willow Creek was no stranger to the fierce winds that howled down Main Street, dragging snowflakes in their wake. The tiny town huddled under the weight of the storm, its crooked storefronts and shuttered windows barely holding back the cold. The lanterns flickered behind frosted glass, casting fleeting, trembling pools of light on the hard, frozen ground. In the shadow of the alley beside Mallister's saloon, Anna leaned against the cold brick wall, her arms wrapped tightly around her thin frame. The shawl draped around her shoulders did nothing to protect her from the bitter chill that had worked its way into her bones. She hadn't eaten for 3 days, hadn't slept properly for 4 nights, and had sought refuge under porches and in stables wherever she could find shelter. Her stomach growled painfully at the rich, inviting scent of beef stew wafting from the saloon, a temptation she couldn't afford. She looked down, forcing the hunger to the back of her mind. Suddenly, the saloon doors burst open, spilling out warmth and raucous laughter. 2 men stumbled into the snow, their breaths steaming in the freezing air. One of them paused, squinting in her direction. "Well, what do we have here?" Amos Kane's voice was thick with drink and cruelty. He staggered toward her, boots crunching in the snow. "Little bird, all alone in the cold?" Anna recoiled, pressing harder into the wall, trying to shrink into herself. "Leave me be," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. Amos grinned, his yellow teeth gleaming in the dim light. "I got a room upstairs, fire's warm, bed soft. Come up with me, and I'll make sure you get supper." "I said no," Anna replied, her voice shaking, though she stood her ground. He stepped closer, his eyes narrowing with malice. "You sure about that? You got nowhere else to go." "I don't need your charity," she snapped, her words trembling but defiant. "Don't pretend like you're better than what you are. I've heard about you." Amos' grin widened, and he reached for her arm. "Let go," Anna said, her voice rising, her body twisting away from his grasp. "Don't be stupid. It's a fair trade. Room and board for a little companionship." Before she could escape, a calm, steady voice sliced through the tension. "Let her go." The words didn't rise in anger, but they didn't need to. The figure who stepped out of the shadows was tall, broad-shouldered, and imposing, with a wide-brimmed hat dusted with snow. His coat flapped in the wind, and a scar ran down his left cheek, pale against his sun-darkened skin. His steely gray eyes locked onto Amos without hesitation. Amos puffed up, hands resting near the pistol at his side. "This ain't your business, stranger." "It is now," the man replied simply. Anna's heart pounded in her chest. Amos glared, his hand hovering near the gun. Then, with a sneer, he spat into the snow. "She ain't worth it anyway," he muttered, stumbling back toward the saloon, curses spilling from his mouth. The stranger didn't immediately approach. Instead, he turned to Anna, eyes softening with quiet concern. "You're not all right," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'm fine," she lied, though her legs felt ready to give way beneath her. He didn't buy it. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked, his gaze searching hers. Anna looked away, unable to answer. Without waiting for permission, he shrugged off his heavy coat and draped it around her shoulders. The warmth wrapped around her like a blanket, and for a moment, she nearly broke down. The scent of saddle leather and with smoke filled her senses. "Why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you helping me?" "Because someone should," he said simply, his eyes steady. He held out a gloved hand. "Name's Jacob Thornton. I own a ranch outside of town." Anna's heart skipped a beat, the weight of his words hanging in the frigid air between them. "I know folks have been talking about you," Jacob continued. "But I've seen you. Try and find honest work, turning away from men like Amos." He paused, watching her carefully. "What's your point?" "My point is I need someone to cook, clean, keep the house running. It ain't fancy, but it's honest work. Room, board, and wages. What do you say?" Anna hesitated, uncertainty clouding her gaze. "What's the catch?" "No catch," Jacob replied, his voice steady. "Just work, and maybe a chance to start over." The snow fell silently around them, and for a long moment, Anna stood still, her fingers curling into Jacob's coat, clutching it tightly as if it might slip away. "You trust strangers that easily?" she asked quietly, her voice laced with doubt. "Not usually," he said with a shrug. "But you don't strike me as the kind of woman who lies about the shape she's in. Are you hungry?" "Yes," Anna whispered, her voice barely audible. "Then let's get you fed." Jacob led her to the wagon parked at the end of the street. She hesitated for a moment, then climbed aboard, shivering against the cold as the horses snorted and stamped. With a snap of the reins, they set off into the storm. As they rode away from the town, Anna glanced back at the dim, flickering lights of saloon. She had traded her pride for survival, but something deep within her told her that maybe, just maybe, this time she might be trading it for something more. The snow thickened around them, muffling the sound of the wagon wheels. The ride was silent, and Anna, bundled up in Jacob's coat, huddled close against him on the narrow bench. She glanced at him, his jaw set, his hands firm on the reins, snow gathering on the brim of his hat. He didn't speak, and she didn't push him to. "How far is your ranch?" she asked after a long while, breaking the silence. 2 hours, maybe a little longer with a storm," Jacob replied, his tone matter-of-fact. Anna rubbed her stiff fingers, trying to warm them in the wind. "Do you live alone?" she asked, her curiosity nudging her forward. "For a while now," Jacob answered. "No wife." "Are you always this quiet?" Anna asked, more to herself than him. He chuckled softly, the sound a deep rumble in the quiet night. "I'm just not one for talking much." They rode in silence for a while longer, the vast Wyoming wilderness unfolding before them. The wind howled around them, but the landscape seemed untouched by it. The snow-dusted hills, the bare trees, and the distant mountains stood like silent guardians. "Not much space out here," Anna murmured, half to herself. "Wyoming's got plenty," Jacob replied, his voice steady but with a touch of pride. "It's a big place." When they crested a ridge, the ranch came into view, more of a scattered homestead than the sprawling estate Anna had imagined. A 2-story house with a slanted porch, a barn slightly leaning to one side, and several snow-covered outbuildings. Smoke curled up from the chimney in lazy spirals. "That's yours?" Anna asked, her voice soft with disbelief. Jacob nodded. "It needs work, but it's solid." He pulled the wagon up to the porch and jumped down to help her out. His touch was warm and steady as he guided her down, but she flinched at first and used to such care. He stepped back, giving her space. Inside, the house was cold but welcoming, with worn furniture and dusty corners that hinted at a past life. The scent of coffee filled the air, and soon after, he handed her a mug and slid a plate across the table. Bread, butter, and cold ham, simple but real. Her hands trembled as she took the mug, the warmth of the drink almost too much. "You didn't have to do this," she whispered. "Maybe not," Jacob replied, his voice low, "but I wanted to." They ate in silence, a silence that felt oddly peaceful, and for the first time in a long while, Anna didn't feel the need to explain herself. That night, after dinner, Jacob leaned back in his chair and looked at her, his expression serious. "Folks in town will talk," he said quietly. "They'll say you're trading favors for shelter." Anna stiffened, but Jacob's voice remained steady. "Let them. It doesn't change anything here. This is your home now, for as long as you want it." His words rang in her ears like a long-forgotten bell finally being heard. She looked down, the weight of his kindness settling on her like the warm blanket of his coat. "You don't know what I've done," she whispered. "What might follow me." "I don't need to," Jacob replied. "I know you needed help, and I know you said yes when you could have said no. That's enough." The wind howled outside, but inside, Anna had hidden the photograph in a place where she wouldn't see it every day. But no matter where she tried to bury it, she couldn't escape the truth it held. It was a memory that whispered of another time, another life. She couldn't hide her, the woman in the photograph, so beautiful, so full of life. But the man who had shared that life with her had whispered, almost himself as he took the picture from Anna's hands, "We were supposed to be married." She died the winter before from fever. The words were heavy, a quiet ache that settled in the room like dust. Anna couldn't find the words to say, and there was no need to. She simply looked at Jacob, at the scar on his cheek, at the way his steady hands placed the photograph back on the mantel. She noticed the grief in his eyes, not the rage that so often accompanied such loss, but something quieter, something more difficult to understand. "She must have loved you deeply," Anna said, her voice soft as she searched his face for any sign of the woman who had been there before her. Jacob nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the photo. "She did," he replied quietly, as though talking about her still hurt him years later. "And I think she would have liked you." The words sank into Anna like a tremor, echoing somewhere deep inside her. For the first time in a long while, she let herself believe that she could be someone who was seen, not just for what she had been, but for who she was becoming. That night, when she went back to her room, she did not look away from the photograph. She let it stay there, its presence no longer an intrusion, but a silent invitation. She wasn't a trespasser anymore. The sun had barely risen the next morning, but the cold still cut through the air as Anna stood at the stove, scraping the breakfast dishes. The house was quiet, save for the wind howling outside, but then she heard it, the sound of wagon wheels crunching into the yard. She glanced out the window, her heart stuttering when she saw Jacob returning from town. His face was shaded beneath his hat, his posture stiff, his shoulders tight. Something was wrong. When he stepped inside, his boots thudded heavily on the floor, and he didn't even remove them before speaking. "We need to talk." Anna set the towel down, her pulse quickening. "What is it?" she asked. "A man's been asking around town," Jacob said, his voice low, well-dressed. Said his name was Victor Harlow. He paused, watching her closely, gauging her reaction. "He says he's your brother." Anna froze. The name twisted through her gut like a blade. Victor. She turned away quickly, gripping the edge of the sink as if the cold porcelain could anchor her. "He found me." The words burned her throat, but she couldn't speak them. Jacob's voice was calm, but there was a hardness in his tone. "What does he want?" "Silence," Anna said finally, her voice brittle. She took a deep breath. 3 years ago, Victor was courting the daughter of one of our father's business partners, Emily. She was just 17, a sweet girl, trusted him. She faltered for a moment, the weight of the memory nearly suffocating her. One night, something happened. He took advantage of her. He hurt her. The words fell between them like stones, the pain of them dragging her down. Jacob said nothing, just watched her with quiet understanding. Her family left town the next day. No explanation. Just gone. "But I saw the bruises," Anna continued, her voice cracking with the weight of the truth she had carried for years. "I knew what he did. I told Father, but Victor had already spun his lies. He said Emily was hysterical, unstable. He convinced Father I was trying to ruin him, out of jealousy, spite." Jacob's jaw clenched as he absorbed her words, his eyes darkening. "And now he knows I could ruin him," Anna said, her voice steady but hard. "If I talked to the right people, judges, business associates, his whole reputation would crumble." She swallowed, the bitterness of the memory fresh. "But he's not here to bring me home. He's here to make sure I never speak again." Jacob nodded slowly, his expression grim. "Then he will find me standing in his way." Anna looked at him, her heart tightening with both gratitude and fear. "I don't want you caught in this." "I already am," Jacob replied simply, stepping toward her. Before Anna could respond, the sound of hooves broke through the tension in the air. She stepped to the window, her eyes narrowing as she saw a lone rider approaching the house. His coat was immaculate, his posture too perfect to be anything but practiced. Even from a distance, she recognized a man who had haunted her for years. Victor Harlow. He dismounted with the fluidity of a man accustomed to command, tied his horse to the porch rail before glancing up at the house with a smug expression. Jacob moved toward the door, but Anna stopped him with a quiet plea. "I will talk to him," she said, her voice firm despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I'll be right behind you." They stepped onto the porch together, and Victor's smirk deepened as he saw her. Well, he said, his voice oozing with false concern. "There you are, little sister. You've certainly made yourself at home. I must say I expected something less civilized. But this, he gestured around the house. This is almost respectable. Anna held his gaze, refusing to flinch. What do you want? To bring you home, of course, Victor said, his voice syrupy. Father has been beside himself. Anna's heart clenched. Father disowned me, she said quietly. Victor's smile tightened. That was before he heard your side. I'm sure if you came back and made amends. I am not going back, Anna cut him off, her voice steady. Victor's eyes flicked to Jacob, and he raised an eyebrow. I suppose this cowboy has something to do with your sudden defiance. Jacob stepped forward, his voice calm but filled with an edge. She's not property. She makes her own choices. Victor's expression hardened. You think she told you the truth? You think she's just some wrong girl trying to survive? He paused, the venom in his words thick. Ask her about what she did in Laramie. Ask her about the scandal with Jonathan Webb. Anna's stomach twisted, but Jacob was already moving, his voice low but firm. That's not your story to twist. Oh, but it is, Victor replied smoothly, his smile curling into something cruel. You see, it's your word against mine, dear sister, and you're already running from one mess. How many more before this man here realizes what you really are? Jacob's voice was edged with steel, but it didn't rise in anger. She doesn't owe you anything. You're not welcome here. Victor's gaze sharpened. Careful, Thornton. You think this ends with a warning? He sneered. I always finish what I start. Then start walking, Jacob said, his stance widening as he braced for whatever might come. Victor hesitated, his gaze lingering on Anna for a moment, dangerous and cold. Then with a sharp, biting laugh, he turned. This isn't over, he spat. He mounted his horse and rode away, his men following him, the wind swallowing the sound of hooves. Anna stood frozen, her heart racing. The chill of the air seemed to seep into her bones. He's not done, she said softly. Jacob placed a steady hand on her back. Neither are we. But even as she nodded, a deep sense of dread began to settle in her chest, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. The snow around Thornton Ranch had begun to melt at the edges, but the weight of Victor's presence hung in the air, thicker than any winter storm. A knock at the door came just after sunrise. Jacob stepped outside to retrieve a telegram, and Anna watched in the kitchen as he unfolded the yellow paper. When he read it, his face darkened. Anna's breath caught in her throat as he handed her the telegram. The words burned through her vision, and the blood drained from her face. Victor had filed formal charges, now claiming that she had stolen $500, more than double the original accusation. 3 witnesses had sworn affidavits, claiming to have seen her take the money from her father's store. He's escalating, she whispered, her voice tight with fear. He knows I'm not running, so now he's trying to bury me. Jacob crouched beside her, his expression grim but determined. He's bluffing. No, Anna whispered, her eyes cold. He's building a noose with forge rope and daring me to call it false. Jacob stood, taking her hands in his. We will fight it. She shook her head. With what? Victor has money, lawyers, connections. I have a past, a ruined name, and a brother who wants to see me disappear. You have me, Jacob said, his voice unwavering. Anna looked away, unable to meet his gaze. I can't let you destroy your life over this. Jacob smiled faintly, the blood still staining his sleeve. The sheriff's voice broke through the tense silence, cold and commanding as he stepped onto the porch. I have to take you into custody. Anna's heart pounded in her chest, but she stood tall, lifting her chin. On what charges? Fraud and theft, Sheriff Lom said, his voice flat, and fleeing prosecution. I have a warrant, signed by the territorial judge himself. Jacob moved swiftly, positioning himself between Anna and the sheriff, his expression calm but firm. Let me see it. Lom handed the warrant to Jacob, who scanned the lines with a frown. This says $500. New evidence came in. Jacob asked, his voice laced with disbelief. The sheriff's voice remained steady. Apparently, Miss Harlow's crime is more extensive than first believed. Anna's hands balled into fists at her sides, her breath coming in short, furious bursts. That's a lie. Then prove it, Lom said coldly, his gaze sharp as a blade. But you'll need to do it in Cheyenne. Jacob didn't hesitate. She has a right to contact a judge. Lom paused, clearly annoyed, but he didn't argue. Technically, yes. Anna turned to Jacob, her eyes searching his face. Judge Whitaker, she whispered, her voice catching on the name. He knows our family. His niece. Emily, Jacob finished softly, understanding blooming in his eyes. Anna nodded. He'll listen. Jacob's gaze never wavered. He turned to Lom. We just need to send one telegram. That's all we ask. The sheriff sighed, his patience thinning. Fine, but I can't wait long. You have until tomorrow morning. I'll send it within the hour, Jacob promised, his voice resolute. Anna stood on the porch, watching him prepare his horse. Her heart twisted with fear and hope, her thoughts a whirlwind. What if he doesn't answer? She asked quietly. Then we'll figure out what comes next. Together, Jacob said, his voice steady and sure. She stepped forward, pressing her palm to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her hand. You meant what you said, didn't you? Jacob looked down at her, his gaze soft but unwavering. Every word. And with that he rode toward town, carrying her last hope tucked safely inside his coat pocket. One simple message. Asterisk investigate Victor Harlow. Ask about Emily. Truth matters more than blood. Asterisk. The sky was still pale and gray when Jacob returned hours later, his expression unreadable as he stepped onto the porch. Anna had been waiting for what felt like forever, the tension in her chest thick as the cold winter air. She looked up at him, her voice rough from exhaustion. Well, Jacob held out the telegram, the edges crinkled from his hands. It was from Judge Whitaker. Anna's breath hitched as she unfolded the paper, her hands trembling. Asterisk Victor Harlow under investigation for fraud and possible involvement in Emily Rollins' death. Federal inquiry underway. Charges against Anna Harlow under review. Federal marshal en route. Hold position. Asterisk. Her eyes blurred, but she kept reading. The words burned in her chest like fire, each one a spark of hope. He believes me. Jacob knelt beside her, his hand steady on her arm as he murmured, Of course he does. Anna couldn't hold back the tears. For the first time in years, the weight that had been crushing her chest began to lift. Maybe, she whispered, maybe I have a chance. You always did, Jacob said softly, his voice filled with quiet conviction. By midday, Marshal Evans arrived. He was tall, his coat dusted with snow, and his two deputies waited outside while he stepped into the parlor, a worn notebook in hand. Miss Harlow, he said, tipping his hat politely, I was sent by Judge Whitaker to begin a formal investigation. I need you to tell me everything. Anna sat on the settee, stiff with nerves, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Jacob sat beside her, his presence solid and reassuring as he offered her his hand. She took it, grateful for the comfort he provided. I was 17, she began, her voice small but steady. Victor was already my father's favorite. He knew it. He used it. I noticed the ledgers weren't right. Missing money, fake entries. But Victor always brushed it off. Marshal Evans nodded, scribbling notes as she continued. Then Emily came along. She was sweet, trusted Victor. I warned her about him, but she believed he meant to marry her. Anna swallowed, her throat tight with emotion. I found her crying one night. She didn't say much, but the bruises were there. The next morning, her family was gone, vanished. Anna's breath caught. I tried to tell my father, but Victor got to him first. Told him I was just jealous, that I lied. And the financial matters. Victor forged land deals, moved money into shell companies. I recognized the names he used. They were ones I helped file when I worked at the store. Marshal Evans jotted down the details, his brow furrowed in concentration. And the charges Victor filed against you? Lies, Anna said bitterly. I never stole anything. He created the story, bought the witnesses. That's how he works. The marshal finished writing, then looked up at her with a steady gaze. I believe you. Anna blinked in shock. You do. We've already discredited 2 of his witnesses. Marshal Evans said. Judge Whitaker confirmed that Emily died from internal injuries consistent with assault. Her family only just spoke up. As for the charges against you, they're dropped, effective immediately. Anna's world tilted, her heart leaping in her chest. Jacob hadn't let go of her hand once, his grip steady and warm. The marshal rose to leave, but Jacob stayed by Anna's side, his presence a constant in this sea of change. Anna's voice was barely a whisper as she said, "I didn't think this day would come." Jacob smiled faintly. "You earned it." Anna turned to him, her heart full. "I couldn't have done it alone." "You didn't have to," he said simply. She looked into his eyes and found no judgment, only a quiet acceptance. "You never asked him to explain, never made me feel like I had to," she said, her voice breaking slightly. He reached out, his hand gentle as he brushed away a tear. "I see you, Anna. Not who they say you are. Just you." The wind stirred outside, but inside the house, the silence no longer felt oppressive. It was comforting, peaceful. Anna leaned back into the chair, still holding his hand, and for the first time, she didn't feel like the past had control over her. It was there, but it no longer defined her. Not here, not with Jacob. The sun rose brighter the next morning, casting golden light over the snow-dusted fields. Birds returned to their song, and the chill that had gripped the land for weeks began to ease. For the first time in a long while, Anna felt the air in her lungs belonged solely to her. Jacob stood on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand. His injured arm was wrapped beneath his coat, and when Anna stepped outside, he turned to her with a soft smile. "You slept," he said gently. "For the first time in days," she replied, her voice lighter than it had been in ages. They stood in silence, watching the sky shift from amber to blue. Jacob finally spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "I've been thinking about everything we've faced, and what comes next." Anna held her breath. "I built this ranch to last," he continued. "For a family, for a future I didn't think I'd have again. But then you came." He knelt, drawing a simple silver band from his pocket, braided, worn, and honest. "Anna Harlow," he said, his voice steady but filled with hope. "Will you marry me?" Her heart surged, her breath caught in her throat. Once, she had traded dignity for warmth. She had walked through snow and shame, her strength alone keeping her upright. But now, a man knelt before her, not to save her, but because he saw her strength. "Yes," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes, Jacob Thornton." He slipped the ring onto her finger, his touch gentle and grounding. When he embraced her, it wasn't desperate, but real. She knew, in that moment, that she was home. Later that week, a letter arrived, its handwriting unmistakable, precise, formal, and cold. Anna held it for a long moment before breaking the seal. "My dearest Anna, asterisk, I write with more shame than a father should ever carry. Marshal Evans came to me last week. He showed me everything, Victor's lies, his crimes, and the pain I caused by believing the wrong child. I have no excuse. I should have listened. I should have looked beyond pride. I failed you. If you can forgive a foolish old man, I'd like to see you again, not to bring you home, but to know the woman you've become. I will not interfere with your life. I only hope it's one of peace and love. Asterisk. Your father, Nathaniel Harlow." Tears blurred Anna's vision as she read it again. Jacob found her in the parlor. The letter pressed to her chest. "He wrote," she whispered. "He finally."